A deep silence blankets the Nevada desert under a canopy of stars. One dark silhouette breaks the horizon, the gaping mouth of Lovelock Cave. This remote cavern holds a secret that has ignited debate for over a century. Did a forgotten race of 8-foot-tall, red-haired cannibalistic giants truly exist here, or is this one of history's most captivating myths? By the end of this journey, you will hold all the evidence to decide for yourself. We will sift through ancient Paiute legends, examine astonishing archaeological finds, and confront a modern scientific investigation that claims to have the final answer. The story begins with a terrifying oral history passed down for generations, a tale of war and a monstrous tribe known as the Si Te Cah. It twists to a chaotic excavation where miners pulled strange, giant bones from the earth, bones that then vanished into thin air. What truly happened in that cave, and why does this story refuse to die? What does it mean when myth and history become forever intertwined? This legend begins not in a history book, but in the memories of the Paiute people. For countless generations, elders have told a story around campfires, a warning passed from parent to child about a time when their ancestors faced a terrifying enemy. These were the Si Te Cah, a name that translates roughly to Chile eaters. They were said to be a tribe unlike any other, described as towering figures with fiery red hair, pale skin, and immense strength. According to the oral history, they did not originate in the Great Basin. They arrived from a distant, unknown land, pushing into Paiute territory with a terrifying ferocity. The conflict was brutal and seemingly endless. The Si Te Cah were not just formidable warriors, they were said to practice cannibalism, preying upon the Paiute people. This detail, more than any other, cemented their status as monstrous figures in the legend, a force of chaos that had to be stopped. The story reaches its climax with a desperate and cunning strategy. The Paiute tribes, banding together, managed to drive the last of the red-haired giants into the mouth of Lovelock Cave. There they heaped dry brush and reeds at the entrance and set a massive fire. Some versions say the giants were suffocated by the smoke, others that they were burned alive. In every telling, the menace of the Si Te Cah was finally extinguished in that dark cavern. For centuries, this remained a powerful but localized oral tradition. Then in the late 19th century, a remarkable Paiute woman named Sarah Winnemucca Hopkins, a translator, educator, and activist, published her life story. In her book, Life Among the Paiutes, Their Wrongs and Claims, she included this very legend, providing one of the first written accounts of the Si Te Cah. Suddenly, a tribal story entered the wider world, a seed of myth now planted in the historical record, waiting for something or someone to make it grow. That written account by Sarah Winnemucca Hopkins gave the legend a new kind of permanence, but the desert itself held a far older record. To understand the discoveries that would soon shake the archaeological world, you must first understand the stage upon which they were found. Lovelock Cave is not merely a hole in a hill. It is a natural time capsule, carved not by a river, but by the waters of a vast ancient lake. Tens of thousands of years ago, during the last ice age, much of northwestern Nevada was submerged under a massive inland sea known as Lake Lahontan. As the climate warmed and the lake slowly retreated, it left behind a fractured landscape of basins and rocky outcrops. In one of these limestone outcrops, the relentless action of the lake's waves eroded a cavity, a process that continued even as the waterline fell. Eventually, the lake vanished, leaving the cave high and dry, a silent bubble of emptiness in the desert floor. This geological origin story is crucial because it created the cave's most important feature, its floor. Over millennia, dust, silt, and debris from the surrounding desert washed in or blew in, layer upon layer, mixing with the remnants of human habitation. But the environment inside the cave remained exceptionally dry and critically alkaline. This combination, the arid desert air and the chemically basic soil, is a preservationist dream. Organic materials that would normally rot away in a matter of years or even months can survive for millennia here. Think of it like a natural version of the salts used to cure meat, drawing out moisture and halting decay. This meant that when people finally began digging into the cave's deep, stratified deposits, they did not just find stone tools and broken pottery. They found a breathtaking array of perishable history. Intricately woven duck decoys made from reeds and feathers, their form still recognizable, fragments of finely crafted baskets and sandals, bundles of arrows, fishing nets, and even food remains. For archaeologists, this was like opening a history book where the pages were not just written, but filled with the actual, tangible objects of daily life, perfectly preserved. The cave's floor was a layered cake of time, with the oldest layers at the bottom dating back over 4,000 years. It was a treasure trove that promised to rewrite the understanding of Great Basin cultures. And preserved within those same alkaline, desiccating layers were human remains. The stage was now perfectly set, the conditions ideal for a discovery that would seem to leap straight from the pages of Paiute legend into the harsh light of scientific inquiry. All it needed was someone to start digging. The year was 1911, and two miners named David Pugh and James Hart were not looking for history. They were looking for guano, the accumulated droppings of bats and birds, a substance prized as a potent fertilizer. The promise of profit drew them to that dark opening in the Nevada hillside, and they began the backbreaking work of scraping out the cave's deep, dry deposits. But as their shovels bit into the compacted layers, they hit more than just ancient guano. Their crude tools began turning up objects that had no place in a simple mineral dig. Fragments of woven baskets emerged from the dust, stone spear points clattered against their shovels, and then they found bones, not the small, delicate bones of animals, but unmistakably human remains, some still wrapped in fragments of ancient matting, desiccated and preserved by the cave's perfect climate. In an instant, their commercial venture had stumbled into an archaeological gold mine. Word of the strange finds quickly spread beyond the mining camp, eventually reaching the ears of scholars at the University of California. By 1912, a proper archaeological expedition led by Llewellyn Loud arrived on the scene, tasked with salvaging what science they could from the miners' chaotic dig. What they encountered was a scene of both wonder and profound frustration. The initial mining had been, by its very nature, destructive. Pugh and Hart had tunneled and scooped, focused on volume, not stratigraphy. They had mixed layers that had been laid down over millennia, scattering artifacts and bones together without any record of their original depth or position. This context, the precise layer in which an object is found, is everything to an archaeologist. It is the difference between finding a single puzzle piece and having the picture on the box. A stone point found in a layer dating to 2,000 years ago tells a completely different story than the exact same point found in a layer from 4,000 years ago. Loud and his team did their best to conduct a systematic excavation of the remaining undisturbed deposits, meticulously recording their finds. They recovered a stunning array of artifacts that painted a vivid picture of ancient life, from those ingenious duck decoys to intricate baskets and tools. But they were also working in the shadow of the earlier disruption. Some of the most sensational claims about the cave, including the initial reports of gigantic skeletons, stem from this messy, overlapping period of discovery. It was never entirely clear which bones came from the careful archaeological grids and which had been unceremoniously dumped from a miner's cart. This blurring of lines between crude treasure hunting and scientific recovery created a fog of uncertainty that would hang over the site for decades. The physical evidence was now out of the ground, but its story was already tangled, leaving room for legend to rush in and fill the gaps. The real treasure of Lovelock Cave was not in the bones, but in the everyday life it preserved. As the archaeologists carefully sifted through the undisturbed layers, they uncovered a breathtaking collection of objects that had not seen the light of day for 2,000 years. These were not the weapons of giants, but the ingenious tools and art of a people who had mastered their harsh environment. Among the most celebrated finds were the duck decoys. Crafted from bundles of chillerets carefully wrapped and shaped, then covered with actual duck feathers, these decoys are the oldest known in the world. They are not crude imitations, they are works of both practical craft and subtle artistry, designed to float convincingly on a pond to lure waterfowl within range of a hunter's net or spear. Their survival is a minor miracle, a testament to the cave's perfect dry darkness. Alongside them lay examples of what is now called Lovelock Cave wickerware, a distinct style of basket so finely woven and complex that it represents a high point of ancient technology. These baskets were not simple containers, they were engineered. Tightly coiled and stitched, they could hold water, a critical advantage in the desert. The people who made them also left behind finely crafted sandals woven from sagebrush bark, designed for traversing rough terrain, and the sophisticated spear-throwing tools known as atlatls. An atlatl is essentially a force multiplier, a lever that fits in the hand, allowing a hunter to launch a dart with far greater speed and power than by using their arm alone. It is a piece of precision engineering. Each of these artifacts, from the deceptive decoy to the watertight basket and the powerful atlatl, tells a silent, powerful story. They are the undeniable signature of a culture, not a band of marauding monsters, but of the ancestors of the northern Paiute people. This was a society that had lived in the region for millennia, developing a deep, intimate knowledge of the local plants, animals, and materials. Their technology was born of observation and necessity, refined over generations. The evidence in the cave layers is clear and consistent, showing continuous, sophisticated human habitation stretching back over 2,000 years. These objects ground the site in a recognizable human past, a past of skillful hunters, masterful weavers, and inventive toolmakers. They provide the true, rich context against which the more sensational claims about the cave must be measured. So what then are we to make of the human remains that were found alongside these beautiful, ordinary objects? The story was about to take another strange turn. But alongside those woven baskets and duck decoys, the miners and archaeologists also uncovered human bones. It is this part of the discovery that ignited the firestorm, transforming a fascinating archaeological site into the epicenter of a giant mystery. The reports that began to circulate were extraordinary. Early newspaper accounts, often sensationalized, described the unearthing of skeletons measuring an incredible 7 to 8 feet in length. They spoke of jawbones so massive they could fit over the face of a normal man, and of long bones like femurs that were strikingly thick and lengthy. One widely repeated claim stated that a set of remains, when partially reassembled, indicated an individual who stood well over 7 feet tall. These were not the delicate frames one might associate with ancient hunter-gatherers. These descriptions painted a picture of physical giants. The initial excavators, including Llewellyn Loud himself, noted in their official reports the discovery of several crania, or skulls, that were unusually large and robust. They took measurements, they documented their finds, and their professional notes lent a degree of credibility to the burgeoning legend. The local newspapers, however, ran far ahead of the science. Headlines screamed about a lost race of red-haired cannibal giants, directly linking the physical remains to the terrifying Paiute legend of the Si Te Cah. It was a perfect storm, a fusion of ancient oral history and modern, tantalizing discovery. The public imagination was captured, and the story of the Lovelock giants was born. Yet here we encounter the single most frustrating aspect of this entire mystery, a problem that haunts every attempt to find a definitive answer. The vast majority of these supposedly giant bones, the very evidence upon which the entire claim rests, simply vanished. They were not carefully cataloged and sent to a major museum for permanent study. In the chaotic aftermath of the guano mining and the subsequent excavation, many of the skeletal remains were dispersed, lost, or even deliberately destroyed. Some were reportedly given away as curiosities to local residents. Others may have been reburied. The precise, measurable proof that could have settled the debate once and for all slipped through the fingers of history. We are left then, not with a skeleton in a museum display case, but with echoes, with second-hand reports, and with a handful of artifacts that survived the chaos. This evidentiary black hole is where myth rushes in to build its home. Without the original bones to examine with modern techniques, we cannot say for certain what those early observers actually saw. Were they truly looking at the remains of a population of extraordinary stature, or was it a case of mistaken perception, amplified by the power of a pre-existing legend? To find a path forward, we must turn to the few tangible pieces of evidence that did survive the century, objects that carry their own strange and compelling story. Among the scattered reports of giant bones, one detail shone with particular eerie vividness: the hair. Multiple accounts from the early 20th century describe some of the Lovelock remains as having distinct reddish or auburn hair. This was not just a note on a bone measurement. This was a tangible visual link to the Paiute legend of the red-haired Si Te Cah. It seemed like a detail too specific to be a coincidence, a thread of physical evidence perfectly matching the oral history. The image it conjures is powerful, a desiccated mummy with a shock of fiery hair emerging from the cave's darkness, a figure seemingly pulled from the realm of myth. But before we accept that image as proof, we must ask a more grounded question. What can actually happen to human hair over thousands of years in a place like Lovelock Cave? Science offers several compelling and far more ordinary explanations. The first and most significant factor is the cave's environment itself. Remember, the deposits are highly alkaline. When human tissue, including hair, is subjected to such conditions over immense periods, complex chemical changes occur. One common process is called chelation, where minerals in the soil, particularly iron oxides, bind to the proteins in the hair shaft. This can impart a distinct reddish or rusty hue to hair that was originally blonde, light brown, or even dark brown. It is not a dye, but a mineral stain, a natural artifact of preservation. Then there is the possibility of cultural practice. The use of red ochre, a naturally occurring pigment made from iron-rich clay, is one of the most widespread and ancient human burial traditions found across the globe. From prehistoric Europe to ancient Australia and the Americas, ochre was sprinkled over bodies, used to paint ceremonial objects, or rubbed into the skin and hair of the deceased. It held profound symbolic meaning, often associated with life, death, and rebirth. If the people who used Lovelock Cave as a burial site employed red ochre in their rituals, traces of the pigment could easily have stained the hair of the remains, creating that iconic red appearance long after the flesh had gone. Finally, there is the simple process of post-mortem change. Hair pigment, like all organic matter, breaks down over time. The complex melanin that gives hair its color degrades at different rates. Often the dark eumelanin breaks down faster than the reddish pheomelanin. This means an ancient head of dark brown hair could, after centuries, bleach to a lighter color, sometimes leaving behind a reddish or coppery tinge as an intermediate stage in its fading. So we have three plausible, scientifically understood pathways to red hair on ancient remains, none of which require the individuals to have been naturally red-headed in life. This does not automatically disprove the legend, of course. It is possible that a people with auburn hair did live in the region, and their unusual appearance was remembered and mythologized by their neighbors. But it does sever the direct, undeniable link. The red hair, that most iconic piece of evidence, becomes ambiguous. It transforms from a clear fingerprint of a lost race into a Rorschach test, where one can see either a confirmation of ancient lore or a simple chemical reaction. The legend provides a vivid, terrifying story, while science provides a menu of quiet, physical processes. They are not necessarily mutually exclusive, but they pull in very different directions, leaving us to wonder which narrative the silent, stained locks truly support. The most persistent claim, of course, is the sheer size of the bones. To understand what those early miners and archaeologists might have actually been looking at, we must apply a forensic lens to their reports. Exaggeration is a powerful force, especially when a discovery seems to confirm a pre-existing legend. In the heat of the moment, a skeleton measuring 6 feet 4 inches could easily be remembered and then reported as 7 feet tall. There is also the problem of incomplete remains. Imagine finding a single, unusually long human femur, the thigh bone, lying alone in the dirt without the rest of the skeleton for context. It is easy to overestimate the height of the person it belonged to. Anthropologists use precise mathematical formulas to estimate stature from individual long bones, but untrained observers in the early 1900s were likely making rough and often inflated guesses. A massive, robust mandible or jawbone is another classic example. A large jaw does not necessarily mean a giant person. It often simply indicates an individual with powerful musculature, perhaps from a diet of tough, fibrous foods. One such jawbone could become the centerpiece of a story, cited as proof that all the inhabitants were giants, when in reality it was just one person's distinctive feature. This leads us to a critical concept in human biology: individual variation. In any population, ancient or modern, there is a natural range of heights and builds. In a group of 100 people, you will likely find 1 or 2 individuals who are significantly taller or shorter than the average. Now consider the burial practices at a site like Lovelock Cave, used over many centuries. If you excavate dozens of burials, statistical probability suggests you will eventually uncover the remains of the tallest person who lived there during that entire 1,000-year span. Finding one unusually tall skeleton does not mean you have found a race of giants. It means you have found the statistical outlier. It is like digging through the records of a small town and finding that one man in the 1890s was 6 feet 8 inches tall. That does not mean the town was populated by giants. It means that one man was exceptionally tall. There is also a medical condition that provides a perfectly natural, if rare, explanation for extreme height, pituitary gigantism. This occurs when a benign tumor on the pituitary gland causes an overproduction of growth hormone during childhood and adolescence, before the growth plates in the bones have sealed. The result is an individual who grows to an extraordinary height, often well over 7 feet. This condition has existed throughout human history. Historical figures like the Irish giant Charles Byon, who stood over 7 feet 7 inches in the 18th century, are documented cases. If a person with pituitary gigantism lived and died among the people who used Lovelock Cave, their skeletal remains would stand out dramatically from the others. Their long bones would be not just long, but often show specific pathological signs of their condition. To an untrained eye, or even to an early archaeologist without modern medical knowledge, this one skeleton could easily be misinterpreted as evidence of a separate giant species. It would be a tragedy of biology, not a revelation of myth, so we are left with a spectrum of possibilities, from simple exaggeration and the confusion of incomplete remains, to the natural variation found in any group, to the genuine medical anomaly of a single individual with gigantism. Each of these explanations fits within the bounds of known science, and each would have left behind the kind of baffling, oversized bones that fuel legends. Without the original remains to subject to modern analysis, we cannot choose between them. We can only recognize that the giant claim is far less solid than it first appears. This absence of physical proof is the single greatest obstacle to solving the Lovelock mystery. The most sensational bones, the ones that could have been measured, photographed, and DNA tested, did not end up in university vaults. They vanished into the chaotic world of early 20th century curiosity hunting. In the years following the cave's excavation, many of the larger skeletal remains and any mummified tissue became prized trophies for private collectors. They were displayed in glass cases in parlors, used as conversation pieces, and treated as oddities rather than historical artifacts. More troubling still, some reportedly found their way into the realm of carnival sideshows and traveling museums of the strange. Imagine a canvas tent on a dusty fairground, a barker calling out to gawking crowds to come see the terrifying, red-haired cannibal giant of Nevada for just 10 cents. In this environment, facts were the last priority. Showmanship was everything. Bones could be embellished, stories inflated, and any inconvenient details quietly ignored. The very evidence that might have proven or disproven the giant theory was stripped of all scientific context and absorbed into a spectacle, making it forever suspect. A key figure in this transition from archaeology to legend was a man named John T. Redd. He was not a trained anthropologist, but a mining engineer and a passionate amateur historian, fascinated by local Native American lore. Redd became one of the most vocal and influential promoters of the giant theory. He collected stories, corresponded with other enthusiasts, and gave lectures, tirelessly arguing that the Paiute legend was a literal historical account. For Redd and his audience, the giant bones were not anomalies to be explained. They were triumphant confirmations of a hidden truth. His advocacy was sincere, but it also helped cement the narrative in the public mind long before any rigorous, modern analysis could be performed. The tragedy is that this very enthusiasm may have contributed to the loss of the evidence. When artifacts are seen as proofs for a beloved theory rather than objects of neutral study, their preservation for future, perhaps skeptical, generations often becomes a secondary concern. The consequence of this loss is profound and ongoing. Today, scientists have tools those early excavators could not dream of. Stable isotope analysis could tell us what these people ate and where they likely grew up. Advanced genetic testing could map their ancestry and see if they represented a distinct population. Precise osteological study could identify signs of disease, diet, or even cause of death. But these tools are useless without the original bones to examine. We are left analyzing historical reports which are filtered through the perceptions, biases, and sometimes the showman's hype of men from over a century ago. It creates a perfect circular argument. The legend points to the bones, and the lost bones forever fuel the legend. This evidentiary void is why the story of the Lovelock giants persists so powerfully in books, documentaries, and across the internet. Mystery thrives in the absence of proof, so we must ask, with the original evidence gone, is there any other way to find an answer? Can modern science return to the cave itself and find new clues buried in the very soil? Mainstream archaeology approaches the Lovelock Cave not as a mystery of giants, but as a profound record of human adaptation. The consensus among scholars is clear and consistent. The physical evidence from the cave itself tells a coherent, if extraordinary, story of the northern Paiute people and their ancestors. Those astonishingly preserved duck decoys, watertight baskets, and atlatls are not the relics of invaders. They are the signature artifacts of a continuous cultural tradition that thrived in the Great Basin for millennia. The human remains found alongside them, according to osteological analysis of the few specimens that remain in museum collections, fall within the normal range of height variation for prehistoric Native American populations. Some individuals were likely quite tall by ancient standards, perhaps even over 6 feet, but there is no indication of a separate population averaging 7 or 8 feet in height. The legend of the Si Te Cah, from this scientific perspective, is not a literal history but a powerful mythological narrative. Across the globe, cultures often mythologize their adversaries, depicting them as monstrous or superhuman to emphasize the threat they posed and the valor it took to overcome them. The conflict remembered in the Paiute oral history could very well be based on real intertribal warfare or clashes with a distinct group of newcomers. But the details, the red hair, the gigantic stature, the cannibalism, these are elements that have been amplified and shaped by generations of storytelling. They serve to define the other as utterly alien and terrifying, transforming a complex historical conflict into a foundational myth of good triumphing over a primordial evil. This process is not unique to the Paiute. It is a universal human tendency. Crucially, after more than a century of excavation and study across North America, no peer-reviewed archaeological or anthropological study has ever confirmed the existence of a separate, giant hominid species on the continent. The fossil record simply does not support it. Every purported giant skeleton, upon rigorous investigation, has been explained as a misidentified mastodon or mammoth bone, a case of mistaken measurement, or, as with Lovelock, the remains of a tall individual from a known human population. The scientific establishment views the Lovelock giant narrative as a classic example of pseudoarchaeology, where tantalizing fragments of evidence are ripped from their context and woven into a story that appeals to our desire for the sensational, often at the expense of the richer, more nuanced truth. That truth, they argue, is no less compelling. It is the story of a resilient people who left behind a breathtakingly intimate record of their lives in a perfectly preserved cave. Yet even with this authoritative consensus, a stubborn question lingers in the dry desert air. If the giants are pure myth, why does their story feel so persistent, so peculiarly specific, and so deeply woven into the landscape itself? The answer may lie not in bones, but in something far more ephemeral. The idea that these giants were simply local anomalies does not satisfy every curiosity. For those who find the mainstream explanation too ordinary, another theory offers a far more expansive canvas, a narrative not confined to the Nevada desert but spanning oceans and millennia. This is the diffusionist hypothesis, the proposal that the Si Te Cah were not native to the Americas at all, but visitors or even colonists from a distant continent. In this captivating what-if scenario, the red hair and reported great stature become clues pointing east across the Atlantic or west across the Pacific. Enthusiasts have proposed links to seafaring Phoenicians, whose traders are known to have ventured beyond the Mediterranean. Others look to the ancient Egyptians, suggesting a lost expedition that somehow found its way to the New World. Some even make a leap into theological territory, connecting the giants to the biblical Nephilim, the mysterious offspring of the sons of God and the daughters of men, said to be the mighty men of old. The red hair in particular fuels connections to Celtic or Nordic peoples, perhaps a band of Viking explorers who traveled much farther inland than history records. their distinctive appearance forever memorialized in Paiute legend. It is a romantic and thrilling idea, the thought of a prehistoric global network, with Lovelock Cave as a remote outpost of a forgotten Atlantic or Pacific empire. The story gains power because it taps into a deep human fascination with lost civilizations and ancient secrets, suggesting our history is far more interconnected and mysterious than textbooks allow. Yet for all its narrative appeal, this theory stands on exceptionally thin ice when subjected to scientific scrutiny. There's currently no credible genetic, archaeological, or linguistic evidence placing Phoenician, Egyptian, or Celtic settlers in prehistoric Nevada. The material culture of Lovelock Cave, those duck decoys and woven baskets, is unmistakably and entirely consistent with the indigenous technologies of the Great Basin, showing no sudden infusion of foreign toolkits or artistic styles. While the possibility of occasional, accidental pre-Columbian transoceanic contact cannot be ruled out entirely, there's simply no proof that such contact resulted in a permanent, giant colony in the American West that waged war with the Paiute. The diffusionist theory ultimately requires us to ignore the overwhelming consistency of the local archaeological record in favor of a grand, unverified story. It replaces one mystery with another, asking us to believe in an even greater historical vanishing act where an entire ship's crew of foreign giants arrived, fought, died, and left no trace of their origins beyond a few ambiguous bones and a legend. This leaves us at a crossroads between two very different ways of seeing the past. One is anchored in the physical objects left behind, the other is carried on the powerful wings of story. But what if the truth is not a choice between them, but a strange fusion of both? The most chilling aspect of the legend is not the giant size, but their alleged appetite. Cannibalism is the ultimate taboo, a label that transforms an enemy from a rival into a monster. To understand if the Si Te Cah truly practiced it, we must move from myth to forensic science. Archaeologists have specific, gruesome markers they look for on human bones to prove cannibalistic activity. The first is cut marks. If a body is butchered for consumption, stone tools will leave distinctive slicing and scraping marks on the bones, often around major muscle attachments, identical to those found on animal bones processed for food. The second is called pot polish. When bones are boiled in a ceramic pot to render fat and make broth, they tumble against the rough clay interior, creating a distinctive, polished sheen on their edges and surfaces. A third sign is patterned breakage, where long bones are smashed open in a specific way to access the nutritious marrow inside. So, was any of this found at Lovelock Cave? The answer, according to the existing archaeological record, is a definitive no. The human remains recovered, including the few skulls in museum collections, do not show these telltale signs of systematic processing for consumption. There is no published evidence of pot polish, nor the specific cut mark patterns indicative of butchering. This absence is significant. It means the physical proof for cannibalism simply is not there in the ground. But science offers other possibilities beyond the monstrous. One is ritual endocannibalism, a practice found in some cultures where consuming a small part of a deceased loved one is a sacred act, a way to honor their spirit and keep them within the community. This is not about hunger, it is about reverence. Another grim possibility is survival cannibalism, an act of absolute last resort during a catastrophic famine. If a group was trapped in that cave during a severe drought or a brutal winter, facing starvation, the unthinkable might have become a temporary necessity for some to live. These acts, however, leave little archaeological trace if the consumption was careful and minimal. Yet there is a third and perhaps most powerful explanation that requires no bones at all. Throughout human history across continents, one of the most persistent ways to dehumanize an enemy is to accuse them of cannibalism. It is a universal trope in the propaganda of conflict. The ancient Romans said it of the tribes beyond their borders. Medieval Europeans attributed it to their rivals. It serves a clear psychological purpose. It strips the opposing group of their humanity, justifies extreme violence against them, and unites one's own people in righteous fear. From an anthropological perspective, this is likely what we are seeing in the Paiute narrative. The story of the Si Te Cah is not a forensic report, it is a foundational myth of identity and survival. By remembering their ancestors' foes as not just tall or fierce, but as cannibalistic giants, the Paiute cemented their own historical identity as the righteous defenders of order against chaos. The cannibalism charge becomes the ultimate moral justification for their eventual total victory. It transforms a complex, perhaps protracted, intertribal conflict into a clear-cut battle between good and absolute evil. So we are left with three lenses, none of which involve a race of habitual man-eaters. The first is forensic and it finds no evidence. The second is cultural, suggesting a rare, ritualistic practice misunderstood by outsiders. The third is psychological, viewing the accusation as a weapon of myth-making. The legend tells us the Si Te Cah were cannibals, but the silence of the bones and the patterns of human storytelling suggest a far more familiar and human story. While stories of vanished giants echo through the decades, a quiet, systematic investigation was finally taking place in a museum basement. In 2014, a team led by anthropologist Dr. Keith Patterson sought to apply modern science to the few precious fragments that had survived the century of loss. Their subject was the small collection of Lovelock Cave human remains held by the Nevada State Museum, bones that had escaped the carnival shows and private collections. This was not about chasing legends, it was a meticulous process of measurement and comparison, a forensic audit of the past. The team focused on the most telling bones, the long bones of the legs, which provide the most reliable estimates of a person's living height. They carefully measured the available femurs and tibias, comparing their dimensions to established biological standards for prehistoric populations. What they found was decisive, and it directly challenged the core of the giant narrative. The bones were consistent with the normal stature range of ancient Native Americans from the region. The single largest femur in the collection, likely from the tallest individual recovered, told a very specific story. When plugged into the anthropological formulas, its length indicated a person who stood approximately 6 feet tall. That is certainly tall, especially for a population where the average height was likely several inches shorter. It would have made that individual noticeably imposing, a standout figure in their community, but 6 feet is a human scale. It is the height of a modern basketball player, not a mythical giant. Dr. Patterson's report, published in a peer-reviewed journal, provided the first rigorous scientific analysis of the actual Lovelock remains. Its conclusion was unambiguous. There was no osteological evidence for a population of 8-foot giants. The so-called giants were, in biological fact, human beings of varying statures, with 1 or 2 individuals who were exceptionally tall for their time and place. This study acts as a crucial anchor point in the storm of speculation. It does not dismiss the legend, but it firmly grounds the physical evidence. The report transforms the mystery from one of biology to one of perception. It asks us to consider how a man of 6 feet, seen in battle or glimpsed in death by people for whom that height was unimaginable, could be remembered across generations as a towering monster. The science draws a clear line. The bones themselves tell a story of human variation, not a separate species. Yet, even with this authoritative report on the table, the legend does not simply fade away. It persists because it speaks to something deeper than bone measurements. It lives in the powerful, haunting space where memory and landscape meet. Dr. Patterson's scientific report should have settled the debate, but legends have a stubborn life of their own. The story of the Lovelock giants did not fade into academic footnotes. Instead, it escaped the cave and embarked on a remarkable second life, transforming from a regional Paiute tale into a full-blown pop culture phenomenon. This journey began with a specific genre of literature often called forbidden history or alternative archaeology. Books like Richard Dewhurst's The Ancient Giants Who Ruled America collected every newspaper clipping, every anecdote, and every local legend of giant skeletons across the continent, weaving them into a single sweeping narrative of a hidden past. In these pages, the Lovelock Cave finds were not outliers. They were key evidence in a grand cover-up, proof that a race of giants once walked the land, and that mainstream science was ignoring the truth. This framing is incredibly powerful. It taps directly into a deep-seated public fascination with secrets, with the idea that our accepted history is incomplete or even deliberately obscured. The story is no longer just about bones in Nevada. It becomes a symbol of rebellion against institutional knowledge, a piece of a much larger, more thrilling puzzle. From the printed page, the legend made the leap to television, finding a perfect home on shows like Ancient Aliens, Here, the narrative expanded even further. The red-haired giants were sometimes presented not just as a lost race, but as potential extraterrestrial hybrids or ancient astronauts, their unusual stature and supposed cannibalism reframed as evidence of otherworldly experimentation or conflict. Similarly, documentary series like In Search of Giants treated the legend with a tantalizing mix of skepticism and wonder, presenting the mystery as unsolved and deeply compelling. Television gave the story a visual language, with dramatic reenactments of Paiute warriors facing hulking figures and sweeping shots of the cave's ominous entrance, all set to suspenseful music. This visual storytelling cemented the legend's emotional impact far more effectively than any newspaper article ever could. But the true engine of the legend's modern life is the internet. Forums, blogs, and countless YouTube channels have become a digital echo of Lovelock Cave itself, a vast repository where every fragment of the story is examined, debated, and amplified. Enthusiasts share digitized scans of old newspapers, analyze blurry photographs of alleged giant skulls, and construct elaborate theories connecting the Si Te Cah to everything from the lost continent of Atlantis to fallen biblical angels. In this boundless digital space, the absence of the original bones is not a problem, it is fuel. The lack of definitive proof becomes proof of the cover-up, and the conversation never has to end. Why does this particular story, among so many archaeological mysteries, resonate with such enduring force? The answer lies in a perfect storm of narrative ingredients. It combines the primal fear of a monstrous other with the tantalizing possibility of a hidden history. It offers a simple, dramatic story, giants versus humans, in a world where real history is often messy and ambiguous. It provides a tangible location you can visit, a dark cave that literally holds the mystery within its earth, and perhaps most importantly, it lives in the fertile gap between what we can prove and what we feel might be true. The Lovelock giant legend endures because it is more than a claim about bones. It is a story about fear, victory, and the haunting possibility that the past was far stranger than we have been taught. It asks us to consider what we choose to believe when the evidence has turned to dust and all that remains is a shadow on the wall of a cave and an echo in the stories we tell. The story from Lovelock Cave feels uniquely haunting, yet it echoes in countless other corners of the world. This human fascination with giants is not a modern invention or a local oddity. It is a thread woven deep into the fabric of global mythology and alleged history. Take the ancient Hebrew texts, for instance, which speak of the Nephilim, the mighty men of old, the heroes of renown, born from the union of divine beings and human women. Their description as giants of great power and stature has fueled theological and speculative debates for millennia. Far to the south, the early European explorers returned with tales that seemed to confirm such legends. When Ferdinand Magellan's expedition rounded the tip of South America in the 1520s, they reported encounters with the native Paiute people, who were notably tall. To sailors of average European stature, these individuals appeared colossal, and the stories were embellished upon their return, giving birth to the enduring European myth of the Patagonian giants, a name that literally means land of the big feet. Across the Atlantic on the island of Crete, a different kind of discovery stirred the pot. In the late 1800s, a Cretan merchant named Minos Kalakarinos uncovered massive storage jars and fragments of a complex later known as the Palace of Knossos. Early reports, often sensationalized, spoke of giant bones found within, feeding directly into the existing Greek myth of the one-eyed Cyclopes. While these bones were almost certainly from prehistoric elephants, the initial interpretation created another data point for giant lore. And back in North America, the Paiute are far from alone. Numerous other Native American tribes, from the Comanche to the Navajo, have their own oral traditions that speak of ancient, formidable beings of great size who once contested with their ancestors for the land. When you step back, a pattern emerges, from the deserts of Nevada to the mountains of Greece, from the windswept coasts of Patagonia to the pages of sacred texts. Humanity has repeatedly told stories of giants. This universal theme suggests something profound about us. Giants represent more than just tall people. They are a psychological archetype. They embody the overwhelming forces of nature, the terrifying unknown, the formidable enemies of the past, or even the forgotten peoples who came before. In every culture, they serve as a measuring stick for human courage, ingenuity, and resilience. The story of David and Goliath is powerful precisely because the underdog triumphs against a giant. The Paiute legend carries the same core narrative, so the tale from Lovelock is not an anomaly. It is a single vivid chapter in a very old, very human book. We use these stories to explain the unexplainable, to give shape to our fears, and to celebrate our survival. But this global context forces a critical question. If every culture has giant myths, does that make them all literally true, or does it reveal a deeper, shared storytelling instinct about how we remember our past and confront the unknown? A shadow lies across the entire field of giant lore, one cast not by ancient bones but by deliberate deceit. To fully understand the atmosphere into which the Lovelock reports emerged, we must acknowledge a troubling but undeniable pattern: the history of the archaeological hoax. The late 19th century was a golden age for such frauds, a time when public fascination with the ancient past collided with a potent mix of showmanship, profit motive, and a deep desire to prove certain biblical or mythical narratives true. Perhaps the most famous American example is the Cardiff Giant. In 1869, a 10-foot-tall petrified man was supposedly discovered by well diggers on a farm in Cardiff, New York. Crowds flocked, paying 50 cents each to gaze in awe at the colossal figure. Newspapers breathlessly reported it as a fossilized giant from a lost age. The truth, however, was far more ordinary. The giant was a complete fabrication, a block of gypsum carved by a stonecutter named Edward Burgart and commissioned by a tobacconist named George Hull. Hull, an atheist, had conceived the hoax to mock fundamentalist Christians who believed in literal biblical giants. He had the statue stained with acid and aged to look ancient, then buried it on his cousin's farm to be found a year later. The scheme was a massive financial success until geologists exposed the statue as fresh gypsum, not ancient stone, and Hull eventually confessed the Cardiff Giant was not an isolated incident. It was part of a wider cultural phenomenon, a giant mania where the public was primed to believe and entrepreneurs were eager to supply the proof. Traveling circuses and dime museums often featured giant skeletons or mummies, most of which were clever assemblages of animal bones, papier-mâché, and sheer theatrical flair. In this environment, the line between genuine discovery and profitable spectacle became dangerously blurred. Now, this does not mean Lovelock Cave was a hoax on the level of the Cardiff Giant. The cave is real, the artifacts are authentic, and the excavations did occur, but the giant mania of the era created a powerful filter through which any unusual discovery would be viewed. Newspaper reporters, eager for a sensational story, had a template already written: the discovery of a lost race of giants. Local boosters, seeing the potential for tourism and fame, had every reason to emphasize the most extraordinary aspects of the find. Even well-meaning individuals like John T. Read, steeped in the giant narratives of the day, could interpret ambiguous evidence through that compelling lens. This context of sensationalism may also provide a more cynical explanation for the most frustrating part of the mystery: the vanished evidence. Consider a possibility beyond simple loss or curiosity collecting. What if some of the most loudly touted giant bones disappeared because, upon closer inspection by someone with knowledge, they could not withstand scrutiny? A femur that seemed 8 feet long in a dark cave might, in the clear light of a museum lab, clearly be a 6-foot femur paired with an exaggerated story. A jawbone that seemed to fit over a man's face might be revealed as simply a robust specimen. In the heated atmosphere of giant mania, such a revelation would be a disappointment, a deflation of a thrilling narrative. It is far easier for an object to quietly vanish, to be relegated to a back room or given away, than to publicly correct the record and admit the giant was, after all, just a tall man. The hoaxes of the 19th century did not just create fake giants, they created a climate where every large bone was suspect and every claim was amplified, making the sober, complicated truth far less attractive than the magnificent, unifying myth. Modern science holds the keys that could unlock this cave's deepest secrets, if only it had the lock to turn. Imagine a scenario where a pristine, undisturbed burial of one of these individuals was discovered today, their remains carefully excavated and transported to a state-of-the-art laboratory. The investigation would begin not with speculation, but with a silent conversation between bone and machine. First, a small sample will be taken for radiocarbon dating, a technique that measures the decay of carbon-14 atoms. This would tell us with remarkable precision exactly when this person lived, placing them firmly on a historical timeline, perhaps 2,000 or 4,000 years ago. We would no longer be guessing at their age, we would know it. Next, scientists would turn to stable isotope analysis. This is a fascinating process that reads the chemical story written in your bones and teeth by the food and water you consume. By analyzing the ratios of different isotopes of carbon and nitrogen, researchers can reconstruct an ancient diet. Did this individual primarily eat fish from the ancient Lake Lahontan, or were they reliant on plants and small game from the desert? The isotopes would tell us strontium isotopes absorbed from local water sources into tooth enamel during childhood could even hint at where they grew up, potentially revealing if they were local to the Great Basin or had migrated from a distant region. The most anticipated test, however, would be the genetic one. Advanced DNA analysis could answer the question that has fueled a century of debate: who were these people? A full genomic sequence could map their ancestry with incredible detail. It could show their relationship to ancient and modern Native American populations, revealing whether they were a genetically distinct group or simply part of the existing human tapestry of the region. It could potentially identify markers for traits like hair color, offering a scientific verdict on the legendary red hair. More broadly, it could trace their deep lineage, showing connections across Beringia, or if the diffusionist theories held any water, reveal a shocking, unexpected genetic signature from across an ocean. Finally, physical anthropologists would perform a meticulous osteological analysis. Using laser scanning and precise digital calipers, they would measure every bone, not to guess at height, but to calculate it using proven forensic formulas. They would examine the bones for signs of disease like pituitary gigantism or for evidence of trauma from conflict. They could study the wear on the teeth and joints to understand their daily activities and health. This would build a complete biological profile, a portrait of an individual, not a monster. These tools represent a revolution in our ability to understand the past. They can transform a skeleton from a symbol into a biography. Yet for the Lovelock giants, this revolution remains a tantalizing what if. The very evidence that could undergo this battery of tests, the best and most complete remains, is gone. They were lost to guano mining, to curiosity cabinets, and to the carnival sideshow long before this technology was even a dream. We are left with a handful of fragments in a museum which have told us what they can, and a century-old echo of a story. The greatest tragedy of this mystery may not be the unanswered question, but the knowledge that we possess the means to answer it, yet lack the one thing we need most to begin. For the northern Paiute people, the story of the Si Te Cah is not a dusty artifact for debate. It is a living thread in the fabric of their identity. Elders within the tribes today often speak of the legend not as a literal history of giants, but as a powerful moral and cultural narrative. It is a story that encodes deep truths about their ancestors' experience, a saga of survival, unity, and the defense of their homeland against a formidable threat. The red-haired cannibal giants serve as a mythological representation of chaos and otherness, a force that the ancestors had to overcome through courage and collective action. This victory, remembered in story, reinforces values of community resilience and the right to protect one's people and territory. The legend is a cornerstone, explaining how order was established in their world, a foundational chapter in the story of who they are. This perspective brings a necessary layer of sensitivity to the entire discussion. Lovelock Cave is not merely an archaeological site. It is a sacred place, a repository of cultural memory, and likely the final resting place of ancestors. The human remains removed over a century ago were not specimens. They were people connected through lineage and spirit to the Paiute of today. The modern tribal stance often emphasizes repatriation and respect, seeking the return of those ancestors for proper rest and advocating for the protection of such sites from further exploitation. For many in the community, the outside world's fixation on proving or disproving the literal existence of giants can feel like a profound distraction, even a disrespect. It risks reducing a rich, symbolic narrative that teaches cultural values into a simple yes or no puzzle about bone measurements, while overlooking the deeper significance of the story and the sacredness of the place itself. This creates a crucial balancing act for anyone approaching the mystery. There is a need to honor the scientific pursuit of understanding the past, to examine evidence with rigor and curiosity. Yet there is an equally vital need to listen to and respect the indigenous narratives that have carried meaning for generations. These are not necessarily conflicting paths, but they require walking with care. The Paiute perspective asks us to consider that some stories hold power not because every detail is forensically verifiable, but because they contain a different kind of truth, one about identity, survival, and the enduring connection between a people and their land. To hear that perspective is to understand that the real mystery of Lovelock Cave may not be what bones were lost, but what truths have been held and protected in the stories told around the fire for 1,000 years. The true marvel of Lovelock Cave lies not in unproven giants, but in the ordinary, breathtaking genius of daily survival. Those duck decoys are more than just curiosities, they are masterpieces of ecological engineering. To craft them, a hunter would first gather chiller reeds from the marshy edges of a shrinking lake, binding them into the precise shape of a floating duck. Then, with infinite patience, they would meticulously attach real duck feathers, likely using sinew or plant fibers, ensuring the decoy would bob and turn realistically on the water. This was not a simple trick, it was a deep understanding of animal behavior, material science, and artistry, all converging for a single practical purpose: to bring food to the family. The decoys speak of a society that did not merely endure the harsh desert, but observed it, learned its rhythms, and innovated within its constraints. Alongside them, the intricate Lovelock wickerware baskets reveal another dimension of this sophisticated culture. These were not just woven containers, they were technological solutions. The tight waterproof coiling meant a person could carry precious water over long distances or store seeds and nuts safe from insects and rodents. The patterns woven into them, often geometric and complex, tell us that utility and beauty were inseparable. A sandal was not just for protection, its specific weave could indicate a person's tribal affiliation or status. An atlatl dart was not just a weapon, its balance and fletching were the result of generations of refinement, turning a human arm into a more powerful, accurate hunting tool. This is the legacy that deserves our fullest attention. It paints a vivid portrait of the desert archaic culture, a way of life that flourished for thousands of years. We see families working together, children learning to weave, elders teaching the subtleties of tracking, and artists finding expression in the very objects that sustained life. Their world was one of profound connection to the land, to the waterfowl on the lake, to the reeds that provided shelter, tools, and art. The cave preserved a snapshot of a vibrant, intelligent, and fully human society. To fixate solely on a speculative race of giants is to stand at the edge of a vast, illuminated library and stare only at a single, ambiguous shadow on the wall. The real story, the one written in reeds and woven fibers, is one of human ingenuity echoing across the millennia, a testament to how life was truly lived in the heart of the ancient Nevada desert. Perhaps the most revealing question is not whether the giants existed, but why we so desperately want them to have existed. This enduring appeal taps into something fundamental within the human psyche, a deep-seated craving for a past that is more epic, more mysterious, and more terrifyingly grand than the one recorded in textbooks. Our standard historical narrative can feel like a slow, meticulous ledger, a record of migrations, tool technologies, and climate shifts, but a race of cannibalistic giants. That is a story. It breaks the monotony, injecting a shot of primal adrenaline into our understanding of ancient America. It transforms a remote cave from an archaeological site into an arena where a foundational battle between good and monstrous evil was fought. We are drawn to this because it feels mythic, and myths by their very nature are more emotionally resonant than timelines. These stories also often represent a longing for a lost world of wonders, a golden age when the earth itself was more potent and populated by beings of immense power. In this framing, the giants are relics of a more primordial, dangerous, and therefore more exciting time. Their disappearance marks the end of that age, the taming of the wild by our clever human ancestors. It is a narrative of ascent, where humanity's victory over the giants symbolizes our own species' triumph over the chaotic, untamed forces of nature. Conversely, the myth can also satisfy a darker nostalgia, a belief that the world was once a more perilous and challenging place and that we have, in some way, grown softer by comparison. The giants become a measure of that lost ferocity. In a modern era where satellite imagery has erased the last blank spaces from our maps, we hunger for new frontiers of the unknown. Since we can no longer mark "here be dragons" on physical geography, we place them in the uncharted territories of history. The Lovelock giant theory offers a delicious puzzle, a mystery that feels solvable yet perpetually just out of reach. It provides a community of fellow seekers, a sense of digging for a truth that institutions have overlooked or suppressed. This connects directly to the powerful allure of ideas rejected by the mainstream. Believing in the giants becomes an act of intellectual rebellion, a way to assert that one can see a hidden truth that experts, in their rigid thinking, have missed. It is not just about bones, it is about the romance of being part of a small group that knows better. Ultimately, the giant myth persists because it feeds a profound human need for wonder. It asks us to look at a lonely cave in the Nevada desert and see not just a shelter for ancient hunters, but a sealed tomb holding a secret that could rewrite everything. That possibility, however slim, is electrifying. It means our world still holds epic secrets, that history is not a closed book but a manuscript with missing chapters waiting to be found. The story endures not in spite of the lack of evidence, but almost because of it. The absence of proof becomes the space where our imagination and our desire for a more spectacular past can live forever. The whispers from Lovelock Cave did not travel alone. They were part of a chorus of stories echoing across the deserts and mountains of the American Southwest, a region seemingly haunted by the bones of giants. To understand if Lovelock was an isolated anomaly, we must widen our gaze and listen to these other, more distant echoes. South of Lovelock, near what is now Las Vegas, lies Gypsum Cave. In the 1920s and 30s, this site gained fame not for giants, but for the discovery of ground sloth, dung, and artifacts suggesting human presence during the Pleistocene epoch. Yet, as with Lovelock, tantalizing rumors began to swirl. Some reports, often from non-archaeological sources, claimed that alongside the sloth remains, excavators had found human skeletons of extraordinary size. These claims were never substantiated in any formal scientific publication from the primary researchers. The official focus remained squarely on the sloths and the evidence for early human habitation. The giant stories seem to attach themselves to the site like spectral hitchhikers, borrowing the credibility of a legitimate dig to gain a foothold in the popular imagination. Further north in the vast dry expanse of the Humboldt Lakebed, other tales emerged. Local legends and old newspaper clippings speak of enormous skeletal remains uncovered by farmers or prospectors, bones so large they were assumed to be from a lost race. These reports are almost always second or third hand, devoid of photographs, measurements, or preserved specimens. They exist as folklore, a kind of archaeological ghost story passed along and perhaps embellished with each telling. When we map these scattered points from Lovelock to Gypsum Cave to the Humboldt Sink, a pattern does emerge, but it is not necessarily one of evidence. It is a pattern of storytelling, where the same compelling narrative finds a home in any location that yields an unusually large bone or an ambiguous discovery. The arid environment itself plays a role here. The same conditions that perfectly preserve duck decoys and baskets in Lovelock Cave also preserve bone elsewhere. In the alkaline soils of ancient lakebeds, large mammal bones from mammoths to bison can survive for millennia. To an untrained eye, a weathered mammoth femur, stripped of its distinctive ends, could be mistaken for a gigantic human thigh bone. A pile of large scattered ribs might be interpreted as the remains of a colossal human rib cage. The landscape, in its silent preservation, provides the raw material for the myth. The crucial task is to separate the two threads that are forever intertwined in these original stories. On one hand, there are credible, if rare, accounts of discovering Native American remains of individuals who were genuinely tall for their time, perhaps standing well over 6 feet. These are the statistical outliers, the individuals with potential gigantism, or simply robust people from populations where the average height was lower. These finds are biologically plausible and fit within the understood range of human variation. On the other hand, there is the mythologized race, the 8-foot-tall, red-haired cannibals who existed as a separate people. This concept steps outside of biological plausibility and into the realm of collective folklore. The regional stories consistently blur this line, taking a kernel of truth, a tall skeleton, and growing around it the elaborate, recurring shell of the giant legend. So are these other sites evidence of a pattern? They are evidence of a pattern of human psychology, not of a lost population. They show how a powerful idea, once seated by a place like Lovelock, can migrate, attaching itself to any mysterious find in the surrounding landscape, transforming individual anomalies into pieces of a grand but phantom puzzle. The story of Lovelock Cave never truly ends at its own entrance. For those convinced of its hidden truth, it serves as a single, tantalizing piece in a much larger and more breathtaking puzzle, a global map of forgotten giants. This is where the narrative expands from a local mystery into a worldwide web of belief, connecting disparate dots across continents into a unified, suppressed history. One of the most dramatic connections is made far to the south, deep in the Ecuadorian Amazon. Here, explorers and alternative researchers speak of a lost city of the giants, a place where local tribes tell of a former race of immense beings. The site itself features massive megalithic stone structures and, most intriguingly, oversized stone tools, axes and machetes of such weight and size that they would be utterly impractical for a person of ordinary stature to wield. Proponents argue these are not ceremonial objects, but the functional equipment of a people who were 8 or 9 feet tall. While mainstream archaeologists often attribute such oversized tools to symbolic or communal use within the giant hunter community, they are seen as undeniable physical proof, a direct parallel to the oversized bones said to have come from Nevada. This creates a powerful echo, a sense that the same phenomenon occurred in wildly different environments, from the high desert to the rainforest. An even more famous and infamous American connection lies within the Grand Canyon. In 1909, the Arizona Gazette published a spectacular front-page story detailing the discovery of a vast underground citadel within the canyon, excavated by a Smithsonian expedition. The article described finding hieroglyphics, copper weapons, and, most sensationally, the mummified remains of giants, some measuring over 9 feet tall. The story captured the public's imagination and has been reprinted and debated for over a century. There is just one problem: it was almost certainly an elaborate hoax. No records of such a Smithsonian expedition exist, no artifacts ever surfaced, and the story is riddled with factual errors and sensationalist prose typical of yellow journalism of the era. Yet despite its debunking, the Grand Canyon giant story remains a cornerstone of alternative history. It persists because it fits the pattern perfectly. A major institution, the Smithsonian, is implicated in a cover-up, and a wondrous discovery is said to be hidden from the public. These stories, from Lovelock to Ecuador to the Grand Canyon, do not exist in isolation for believers. They form a self-reinforcing network. When one source is questioned, proponents point to another. The lack of evidence in one location is explained by the supposed discovery in another. The credibility of a debunked newspaper article is bolstered by the oral traditions of an indigenous tribe. This network creates a resilient ecosystem of belief, one that is virtually immune to any single piece of contradictory evidence, because the faith is not in any one bone or tool, but in the overarching narrative itself, the idea that our accepted timeline is wrong, that a race of giants once walked the earth, and that powerful institutions have conspired to keep this truth buried. It is a compelling, even romantic vision of history, where every strange artifact and every old legend becomes a clue in a grand, global mystery waiting to be solved. That forensic report offers us not a monster, but a blueprint. Let us sketch a face for the Si Te Cah, not from legend, but from the quiet data of bone and soil. Based on the measurements from the museum collection, our subject stands roughly 6 feet tall. In the context of his time and community, he is a giant, a full head taller than most of the men around him. His frame is not cartoonishly massive, but powerfully built, with the dense musculature of a life spent hunting, trekking across rugged basins, and wielding an atlatl. His face is not that of a fair-skinned outsider, but carries the strong, distinctive features of his Native American ancestry, with high cheekbones and a broad jaw. His hair, perhaps once dark, now carries the rusty stain of iron-rich ochre, a sacred pigment carefully applied in a burial ritual long forgotten. His eyes hold the focused intensity of a hunter who has survived droughts and conflicts, a man deeply familiar with both the bounty and the brutality of the ancient desert. This is not an 8-foot-tall cannibal from a nightmare. This is a human being, a formidable warrior and a skilled provider whose physical presence was so commanding, so outside the norm for his era, that it became the seed for something far grander in memory. The legend required a monster, but the bones suggest a man whose reality was extraordinary enough to be remembered for millennia. His true story is one of human variation, of a life lived in an extreme world, and of the awe he inspired simply by walking across it. When the Paiute ancestors faced him, they did not face a mythical beast. They faced a towering, powerful adversary who represented a genuine and terrifying threat. Over generations, as the story was told and retold around campfires, that very real threat evolved. His height stretched skyward in the telling. His ritualistic ochre became a mane of unnatural fire. His prowess in battle transformed into a cannibal's hunger. The human adversary was slowly sculpted by time and fear into the perfect symbol of the other, a creature that had to be vanquished to ensure the tribe's survival. The reconstruction based on science gives us a person, the legend gives us a parable. One is a portrait of an individual who lived and died, the other is the collective memory of a people defining themselves against what they feared most. This visual contrast is the heart of the mystery. It asks us to hold two truths at once, the truth of the skeleton, tall and human, and the truth of the story, epic and terrifying. Both are real in their own way, one etched in calcium, the other carved into the identity of a culture. One is the fact, the other is the meaning that was made from it. The evidence from Lovelock Cave presents us with two distinct legacies, one of science and one of story. On the scientific ledger, the balance is clear. There is no proof for a race of 8-foot-tall, red-haired cannibals. The few surviving bones point to human beings of varying statures, with some individuals who were remarkably tall for their time and place. The red hair is easily explained by chemical processes or ritual ochre. The cannibalism claim lacks the forensic markers to support it. Modern analysis draws a firm line. The physical remains do not describe giants. Yet to stop there feels incomplete, as if we are dismissing the echo because we cannot find the source of the sound. The Paiute legend did not emerge from a vacuum. Oral histories are not fiction, they are memories shaped by time, a culture's way of encoding foundational events. The story of the Si Te Cah is too specific, too geographically anchored to be pure invention. So what historical truth might lie at its heart? The most plausible conclusion is that the Paiute ancestors did experience a profound and terrifying conflict with another group. This group may have been physically distinct, perhaps noticeably taller or more robust on average. They may have had different customs, perhaps involving ritual practices that seemed monstrous to outsiders. They may have worn their hair differently or used red pigment in ways that made them memorable. They were in essence the other, a formidable people who contested for resources and land in a harsh environment where survival was never guaranteed. The legend preserves the trauma and the triumph of that conflict, compressing generations of struggle into a single symbolic saga. The giants are a narrative device, but the war, the fear, and the eventual hard-won victory are likely very real. This is where the two legacies finally meet. The lost evidence created a void. Into that void flowed the powerful human need to explain, to dramatize, and to remember. The tall warrior became the giant, the feared enemy became the cannibal, the strategic victory became the epic cleansing by fire. Fact and folklore became braided together in that cave, inseparable strands of the same rope. We cannot untangle them now, nor should we necessarily try. Lovelock Cave does not offer us a simple answer, it offers us a choice. We can choose to see only the myth and chase a phantom. We can choose to see only the science and dismiss a culture's memory, or we can choose to see both, to understand that the deepest truths are sometimes held not in bone alone, but in the stories we tell about those bones long after they have turned to dust. The cave's final whisper is not a revelation about giants, but a lesson about history itself and how we as humans forever strive to make meaning from the shadows of the past. From chilling Paiute legend to chaotic excavation, and finally to modern scientific scrutiny, our journey through the mystery of Lovelock Cave has covered vast ground. We began with an oral history of terrifying red-haired giants, a story of survival so powerful it refused to fade. We followed the miners whose shovels unearthed a preserved world of ancient life and whose reports of oversized bones ignited a century of speculation. We examined the few surviving artifacts, marveling at the true genius of the people who lived there, and confronted the frustrating void where the most sensational evidence simply vanished. And we arrived at the conclusions of modern science, which finds no proof for a race of giants, only for human beings of remarkable, but not supernatural, stature. This is not a story with a simple ending, where myth is neatly disproven and filed away. Instead, it is a testament to the enduring power of a narrative that lives in the space between what we can prove and what we feel might be true. The giants of Lovelock Cave, whether viewed as a cautionary tale born from real conflict or a lost chapter waiting for proof, force us to confront how history is written. It is written in the stratified layers of a cave, in the precise measurements of a femur, and equally in the campfire stories passed down through generations, stories that shape identity and explain the world. This legend's persistence reminds us that the past is never a single, settled fact. It is a conversation, sometimes a debate, between physical evidence and human memory. It is always more layered, more mysterious, and ultimately more fascinating than any textbook summary could capture. So what do you believe lies at the heart of this Nevada mystery? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed unraveling this enigma with us, subscribe for more journeys into the world's greatest historical puzzles.